was a biting blend of horror and comedy.
You're obviously having a bad hair day.
Funny.
It paved the way for a pop culture franchise.
Go, team, go.
But its success came after a challenging production that drew blood on both sides of the camera.
It was a battle.
A controversial director, a scandal-plagued co-star, and a turbulent shoot with truly high stakes. On Backstory, Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
I've been searching everywhere for you, Buffy,
Why?
to bring you your birthright.
My birthright? Is that like a trust fund or something?
Released in 1992, Buffy the Vampire Slayer cleverly blended Valley Girl comedy
I didn't even break a nail.
with horror movie chills in the tale of a high school cheerleader with a serious secret calling.
I'm the chosen one and there are vampires?
Yeah.
Does Elvis talk to you?
It's one of the great titles of all time. Valley Girls being vampire slayers. That was a very funny spin on the notion of a horror movie.
Vampires of the world, beware.
Very scary in parts, very funny. How do you make those two things fit together? I mean, Psycho, very scary movie, not particularly funny.
Okay, I think we both get the point.
Finding the right tone was just one challenge on a shoot that many of its cast and crew considered the most difficult and tense of their careers.
It was a nightmare. I was tearing my hair out of my head. I was out of my mind. I was crazed.
It's way past medication time for you, buddy.
We had no time, we had no money. I quit once. I just looked around and went, that's it, I'm going home.
Time to stop the killing, to stop the vampires.
The saga of Buffy began in the early 1990s when screenwriter Joss Whedon came up with an idea that cleverly reversed a classic monster movie tradition. This time, the story's bubble-headed blonde wouldn't be a victim, but the monster-killing heroine. The result was a script that was equal parts satire and straight-faced action, a blend that delighted its future producer, Howard Rosenman.
The kind of tongue-in-cheek, very hip writing of Joss Whedon just blew me away. But mixing genres in Hollywood is like a no-no. There was no one that was willing to direct it. There was no one that was willing to finance it.
To help find the money, Rosenman turned to two colleagues, independent film producers Kuzui and his wife, Fran Rubel Kuzui. And as financing began to fall into place, Rosenman decided to offer Fran an even more important role on the project.
Fran had directed a movie called Tokyo Pop, so when I couldn't get any other directors, I finally said, well, what the hell?
And I went, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, okay, I'll do it. And he said, well, how do you know? And I went, well, it's so stupid, I'll do it. And he said, well, take it home and read it. So I took it home and I read it and I just laughed and laughed and laughed. I'd always wanted to make a martial arts movie. So we talked about how we could incorporate martial arts into the story and how she could use martial arts to kill off the vampires.
To play the title Slayer, Rosenman and Kuzui considered many of Hollywood's most promising young actresses.
Alyssa Milano was interested in playing Buffy, but that fell through.
Well, Alicia Silverstone really wanted to do it, but she was too young.
Drew Barrymore, we wanted to be in it. I think she passed.
Ultimately, they found their California Valley girl in 22-year-old Christy Swanson, who'd been acting in films and commercials since the age of 9.
Don't you get it? I don't want to be the chosen one.
She was fabulous. Christy Swanson had to carry this movie. She was in every scene.
All I want to do is graduate from high school, go to Europe, marry Christian Slater, and die.
She was on time, she was prepared, she's smart. She was really a joy to work with.
You know what's funny about Christy? Huge country music fan. Her trailer would be full of loud country music all night long. All you'd hear were occasional screams of terror from the set, and then Willie Nelson. Kind of a weird mix.
For Christie's co-star, the producers lucked out in casting Luke Perry, the red-hot heartthrob from TV's Beverly Hills 90210. Perry took the part, even though the role of Pike, Buffy's boyfriend-to-be, was clearly secondary to the script's strongly written heroine.
I had to have lunch with him. And as I was waiting for him, I went into the newspaper stand, and there was People magazine, and he was on the cover of it. And like, I live by People magazine, and I looked down and I went, oh my goodness, oh my gosh, what am I gonna do? I mean, I'm not that intimidated, but it was just sort of like a big deal.
Pike is the damsel in distress in the movie here, you know? He's like, so we did the big role reversal thing, and Swanson's the hero. Hi.
Hi.
The filmmakers scored 2 other casting coups by hiring Blade Runner co-star Rutger Hauer as Buffy's vampire nemesis.
You finally brought me someone real. But is she ready?
And Donald Sutherland to play Merrick, Buffy's mysterious mentor.
I train girls to be slayers. I have done so for 100 lives, and I shall continue to do so.
But Sutherland did have some doubts about the project.
I couldn't bring myself to say I was making a film called Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Well, forget you.
Another killer casting choice was Paul Rubens, better known for his alter ego, Pee Wee Herman, and most notorious for his recent arrest on charges of public exposure.
Paul was a personal friend of mine, and he had just had that terrible thing happen to him in the movie theater in Florida.
What I found very interesting is that he chose to play the movie essentially dressed with the same beard that he had in the mugshot when he was arrested. Sort of sticking his finger to whatever anybody might say about it.
Hi. How's it going?
The first day on set, he walked on, he made a crack about being in a movie theater or being in Florida. And so all the air of, whatever balloon of tension was on the set, all the air came right out of it, and we went to work. And I remember he found a Pee Wee Herman doll somewhere in some toy store, and he was using that to sort of act out what had happened in Florida. It was hilarious.
He's hilarious. He had a big fight with Donald. Donald said, I'm the only one that's going to wear the beard here. And I said, I can't believe that I'm dealing with this. I'm an adult. And finally, I said to him, the name of this movie is Buffy the Vampire Slayer. It's not Potemkin.
Well, I don't think there's anything more for us to say.
An unhappy actor wouldn't be the only problem on a movie that in late 1991 jumped from a shoestring independent to a $9 million studio film.
Fox said that they would make the film if we could deliver it by June 15th. I had really almost no time to prepare the movie. I think we had 5 weeks from the day that they said go to the start of principal photography. So I just decided that I would just, hold my nose and jump into the water.
Good luck and all.
But like Buffy herself, Kuzui and her cast were about to embark on a journey that would test them to their limits. A journey that would be equal parts adventure and nightmare.
Wake up, sweetie.
When Backstory returns, a vampire slayer fights the undead, and a film crew goes batty behind the scenes.
I can't believe I'm in a graveyard with a strange man hunting for vampires on a school night.
On February 20th, 1992, cameras rolled on the tight 29-day shoot of Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
All right, what do we do now?
We wait for Robert Berman to wake up.
Action!
Buffy!
But it wouldn't take long before the movie's on-screen mayhem was reflected in turmoil on the set.
We'd only had one read-through, really, and there was no time for the actors to get to know each other and for me to see how they worked with each other. So I had to really learn on my feet. The decision I made was to let people do their own thing. You want to add that? I knew that I didn't have money, and I knew that I didn't have time. So I decided to make a movie using as much energy as I possibly could and just shake the jar. That would be the movie. And that can sometimes be quite a volatile cocktail.
As Fran Rubel Kuzui encouraged cast and crew to make their own choices, some members of the team began to take issue with her freewheeling and improvisational approach.
Shooting was difficult. We were shooting 28 nights. And we were shooting them in January and February, which is rainy season, and then there were no cover sets. And cover sets are where you go when it rains, and you have to shoot something. Fran liked making up the shot in the moment, and that meant we didn't know exactly what we were going to be looking at.
Everyone was sort of left up to their own devices, in a way, to figure out what to do.
Master, what are we waiting for? The Slayer is unmasked. Let's finish it.
Paul's death scene, that was totally improvised.
Admit it, Buffy. Aren't there times when you just feel less than fresh?
And I just went, you know what, Paul? You just die, okay? Just figure it out, die.
We're rolling, he dies.
You're gonna wish you died.
And we've now moved on when all of a sudden, Paul rises up in the back of the frame. And then he dies again. And we keep going. And then he rises up again. And he just did this routine.
He started to die, and he just kept dying and dying and dying.
And I spent the entire time with a towel in my mouth because I had to be next to the camera, but I was laughing so hard that I was ruining the takes.
At times, entire scenes were improvised, like the role of a basketball coach, played by comedian Mark DeCarlo.
Assert your personhood! Actualize!
The Lakers were very popular, and Pat Riley was coaching, so I thought it'd be funny to have a coach who wants to look like Pat Riley, but knows absolutely nothing about basketball. If you look at the boards I was drawing on, it's all these Masonic symbols.
Score some points! Hey, wait, you missed practice again today. I think you better sit down and think about how that made me feel.
Buffy did have the good luck to feature many future stars-to-be in supporting roles, including David Arquette.
I'm hungry!
And 2 future Oscar winners, Hilary Swank and Ben Affleck.
Ben Affleck played one of the basketball players under my tutelage.
It was his first film, and he kept coming up to me and asking what his motivation is. It was a really hard day because I don't know how to play basketball. And I went, I'm going to remember this guy. And if he ever shows up at a casting call, I'm going to really have to avoid him because he has a lot of questions as an actor.
Kill him a lot.
Ben Affleck wasn't the only actor seeking more direction. Buffy's leading lady also grew frustrated with Kuzui's hands-off style.
Hi. Is that your van?
Yeah, it was. Just sort of ready for the jump.
Halfway through the shoot, Christy said to me, you know, I'm not accustomed to working this way. I'm accustomed to having the director tell me what to do. My way of working with actors was more or less to allow them to create the character themselves rather than for me to tell them who the character is.
Interesting choice.
Last-minute decision.
Donald Sutherland, he was clearly thinking twice about what he had done. We're doing this scene, and it's totally chaotic, and he was just sitting there, just shook his head.
Look what I've done.
As production continued, Fran Kuzui also became aware that screenwriter Joss Whedon was less than thrilled with the shape the film was taking.
I don't think Joss was particularly happy with my vision of his script. I think my vision was a lot lighter and funnier and less menacing than the script that he had originally written.
Someone get an ouchie?
Fox kept asking me to make the film scarier and scarier.
You were my friend.
Now, I'm a god. And now, you're a coat rack.
I kept thinking, well, you know, this is about as scary as I would want a kid to see if they were 13 or 14 years old. Even though Fox kept saying, you know, crank it up, I didn't want to do that. And I think Joss was very disappointed that I didn't.
Another challenge for the director and her team was quickly turning real Los Angeles locations into suitable spots to film.
Rutgers' lair was an old movie theater downtown. We wanted it to be theatrical and funny in a strange, eerie way.
City of Angels is ours for the taking.
It was very interesting working downtown. I had my car broken into and had all my camera equipment stolen. My favorite location was definitely the storage yard for the floats. I thought that was a great way to present Luthor to Buffy for the first time. It was quite a wonderful visual.
I didn't expect to see you so soon.
We had no money for special effects. And I said, well, it would be so great if they could just float into frame and float out of frame. And somebody said, look, there's a forklift. So we would raise Rutger and Paul up and down on this forklift.
Has our time finally come? Have you ripened so fast? Come closer. Look at me.
Does anybody here have a problem with this but me?
Fortunately, the shoot was now nearing an end, and as production entered its final days, Buffy's producer, its actors, and its director waited to see if audiences would scream with delight or flee movie theaters in horror. When Backstory returns, a vampire slayer sees the light of day on movie screens and on television.
You know, Buffy, you're not like other girls.
In March of 1992, the filming of Buffy the Vampire Slayer was drawing to a close. But unfortunately, creative differences persisted between the studio and director Fran Rubel Kuzui.
The studio was aggravated because she wasn't listening to any of our notes.
Oh. Somebody had made up a button that said, Buffy 2, just say no. And everybody was wearing them.
Kuzui herself was plagued with doubts about the final product.
The hardest thing is your own personal demons and the discussions you have with yourself of there isn't enough time, there isn't enough money, I'm a female director and I don't know how to play basketball, whatever it is.
We knew the vampires would love it. It's hard to get them into the matinees, though. You got to do a lot of midnight shows for the vampires.
But 20th Century Fox still hoped that Buffy's ingenious premise might result in a summer hit. And the studio rallied behind a clever ad campaign.
The one sheet was a girl in a cheerleading outfit, and she was holding a pom-pom in one hand and a stake in the other, and it was brilliant.
There was a lot of buzz around this film, a lot of buzz. And I had all these agents calling me and telling me I was Penny Marshall and that this movie was going to do $50 million.
I just met this girl named Buffy on Pike. But as it turns out...
You have been chosen, Buffy.
To do what?
To stop the vampires.
When things started getting weird around here. Stab him in the heart!
Christy Swanson.
I am so sure.
Buffy, the Vampire Slayer.
On July 31st, 1992, Buffy the Vampire Slayer bowed on movie screens nationwide.
It's a high comedy satire, it's a love story, it's an action adventure, and there are vampires in it.
But despite a number of positive reviews, the result was not the summer sleeper everyone had hoped for. Buffy grossed a less than monstrous $14 million in its original theatrical run.
It's too bad. I had such high hopes.
It was an enormous disappointment at the box office. Fox was really disappointed. It opened during the Summer Olympics on a weekend when people were really focused on the Olympics, and I would have liked to have seen it open around Halloween.
But Buffy the Vampire Slayer refused to die. 5 years after the movie's release, writer Joss Whedon revamped his story as a television series, this time producing it himself.
The tone of what they created on the television show was much more serious in its intention, and they made the vampire scenes terrifying.
When it came time to do the TV show, this was a good opportunity for Joss to explore his vision of what he had originally intended. I think the TV show is great, and I love Joss's vision.
The result was a critical and a commercial smash, spawning TV spin-offs, Buffy merchandise, and renewed interest in the original film.
Thus, the Buffy juggernaut. Think of that as the seed The tree has grown.
Now, I'm really pissed off.
A decade after its making, Buffy the Vampire Slayer the movie continues to take flight, finding new fans each year with its lighthearted and witty blend of scares and social satire.
Whether you're screaming or laughing, it's the release of tension, like a good sneeze, or other things that release tension that we don't need to go into at this point.
Please.
It's such a delicious movie, and anybody who would read Joss's writing would see immediately that it's just fantastic.
Does the word duh mean anything to you?
I am enormously proud of Buffy, and there was a real message in the film which I didn't want to be eclipsed by the scariness of it, and that is that everybody is who they are.
Maybe I'll surprise you.
Young women felt empowered by it. Here was this young, bubble-headed girl who was the chosen one, and they can be chosen ones in their own way.
I have something that the other girls didn't have.
And what might that be, pray?
My keen fashion sense.